Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 500 library systems across the US, Canada, and New Zealand with the goal of making Author Talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator in conversation with each of the authors and presenters that you will hear from throughout our series. Today, we are so honored to have the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Latino, Adrián Aldaba, and Emily Key with us to talk about the book Nuestra América, 30 Inspiring Latinas and Latinos Who Have Shaped the United States. Before we jump in, I want to give you all that standard housekeeping information that keeps everything running smoothly, and then I will turn things over to our presenters. We have compiled some questions that were pre-submitted with registration, but we welcome you to submit questions during the presentation by clicking that questions button. Depending on your view, it could be off to the side of the live stream or just below the video. There are quite a few of you tuning in today, and we will take as many questions as we can during the Q&A period. And as a reminder, there will be a link to the recording sent out to all registrants in about 24 hours. So if you have to leave early for any reason whatsoever, that's no problem. Now, to formally introduce our guests for today. Adrián Aldaba, a Chicago native, is the National Programs Manager for the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Latino. In this capacity, he serves audiences of all ages by bringing the Latino Museum's programs and content to the communities where they live and thrive outside of the Washington, D.C. area. Aldaba co-authored Strategies for Engaging and Representing Latinos in Museums, a free resource released by the American Alliance of Museums Latino Network. He joined the Smithsonian more than a decade ago after working as a research assistant for the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard University. He earned his Bachelor in Arts, cum laude, in Romance Languages and Literatures from Harvard College. Emily Key is the Assistant Director of Learning and Public Engagement at the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Latino, where she developed the museum's learning continuum and education vision centered on creating opportunities for visitors to experience, learn, reflect, and transform by sparking curiosity and encouraging lifelong learning. Key oversees national bilingual programming, community engagement, K-12 aligned educator resources, publications, and the Young Ambassadors Program, a nationally recognized youth leadership program. Prior to the museum, she led education efforts for the Smithsonian Latino Center and worked in the education department of the National Air and Space Museum. Key holds a graduate certificate in Arts and Culture Strategy from the University of Pennsylvania and a BA from the George Washington University. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm going to turn things over to you now.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon with all of our virtual guests. We are excited to bring this book talk to you, Nuestra América, Understanding the American Experience Through Children's Literature. I am Emily Key, as Brandon shared, and I'm here with my colleague, Adrián Aldaba. It is an honor to be able to work for the Smithsonian and for the National Museum of the American Latino. And today's book talk is really going to be a dive into a story of how we created this book, what inspired us to create this book, the process of creating a book with the Smithsonian, which is not an easy feat, and really where we hope this book can help communities across the country. And so with that, I am going to give you a little introduction as to who the National Museum of the American Latino is. If you haven't heard of us, we are a recent addition to the Smithsonian family. We are the 20th or 21st museum, depending on how you count, of the Smithsonian. And we were established in December of 2020 as an act of Congress. The museum is here to honor the dreams, the challenges, and the triumphs of U.S. Latinos, elevating our stories within the nation's narrative. And we create transformative experiences to foster a deeper understanding of American history and culture and connect with communities nationwide. We really see our work as instrumental in sharing the American experience and the story of U.S. Latinos and contributing to that American experience and narrative. One of the things that you'll learn a little bit about is what the museum has been doing since December of 2020. So, Adrián, would you like to share a little bit of our key milestones?
Absolutely. Really, since and it's such an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Some key milestones. Since we opened in 2020 is really opening a 4,500 square foot gallery and multi-purpose learning space. Our Molina Family Latino Gallery and our General Motors Learning Lounge, where I'm virtually beaming from. Since opening, we've welcomed over 900,000 visitors to our gallery, facilitated over 400 tours for more than 8,000 visitors. And really a lot of the work that I support is delivering over 45 programs to over 53,000 attendees in 14 cities and 11 states, as well as in Washington, D.C., with support of our Smithsonian collaborators and publishing houses that we'll dive in a little deeper today. We've sold more than 60,000 children's books and educational games, also facilitated more than 33 youth programs for more than 700 participants, and the museum proudly has been traveling to touring exhibitions around the United States. So just a little taste of really the impactful work that the museum has been doing. While we don't have a physical building at the moment, that's something that we're building towards. The museum has been active and busy bringing the stories of our communities, not only in Washington, but across the country. Emily, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Office of Learning and Public Engagement and our work there?
Sure. So each museum is a world in and of itself. And if you're not familiar with the way museums are structured, there is the research and scholarship side of the museum, which really focuses on collections, building a collection that is representative of the stories that the museum needs to tell, then doing the research and the scholarship to understand more about those objects and their stories, as well as how they connect to U.S. history, and then really putting all of that together in an exhibition. Then on the public engagement side, we make sure that the visitor who comes in through our doors, who goes to our programs, who visits our website, have opportunities to learn and engage with the content, to reflect and share with each other their own lived experiences and how that might connect with the stories and objects that are being highlighted, and really to transform their own collective and individual curiosity to become lifelong learners. The goal of most museums, and especially here at the Smithsonian, is to encourage lifelong learning. And lifelong learning really starts at home, learning how to read a book, and continues through school, and then continues after school in your homes and your communities, and as you grow into your own adulthood. And so really the Office of Learning and Public Engagement is here to engage with learners of all ages and make sure that we create and share those moments that spark that curiosity. One of the most important things that we do is to make sure that our content, whether it's a public program, a student program, or an education resource, is well researched and grounded in scholarship and in the objects that are part of our national collection and our national history here at the Smithsonian.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll jump into really the heart of our conversation today is really, talking about Nuestra América, 30 inspiring Latinas and Latinos that have shaped the United States, and kind of taking you on a little journey of what was that process. Emily mentioned earlier, writing books with the Smithsonian, what does that co-creating process look like, with not only the publishers, but with the authors and illustrators we work with, to really ground the work that we're doing and sharing with folks all over the country and the world, that's grounded in Smithsonian scholarship, research, and collections. And so for those of you that have seen our books, these are, I'll walk us briefly through the suite and then dive into a little bit more of the process. So Nuestra América is written in both English and in Spanish. So Emily, do you remember the term? It's not a bilingual publication. It's
the Duolingo. It's
there we go.
English only, Spanish only. So it was
Thank you.
we've also been introduced to all these terms in the publishing world, which most museums don't get this opportunity, and we're just so privileged to be able to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Emily. So this is a publication that's both in English and in Spanish. And so here you have both covers of the 30 inspiring Latinas and Latinos that have shaped the United States, and really has taken us on a really incredible journey of not only how we're crafting books. This is our first publication that came out in 2020. And from it, not only do we have these two separate book publications, but we have a suite of materials, including a 500-piece puzzle that features profiles that are found within the book itself, along with a memory game as well. And so that is, and it has biographies and a whole way to engage. And these are also in English and in Spanish. So the puzzles and the memory games are bilingual, and the books are Duolingo, as Emily had mentioned. So from Nuestra América, how did we get through this process? So there really is, a journey really starting with research and ideation, and then the actual writing process, which I think is a lot of times where we think the process starts. And then what happens with all that information, what happens with these books, and, thinking about supplemental resources and products. And so really, this all really started with a collaboration and with our first exhibition that we'll dive into shortly. So really thinking about research and what happens with all of that research and content that doesn't make it into the exhibit. And so really this is an idea. We were approached by Smithsonian Enterprises. Smithsonian, as Emily mentioned, is a microcosm. It's a world within itself, and the Smithsonian Enterprises is the business arm of the Smithsonian. And they came to us and gave us shared the opportunity to possibly to write books. And from that, really, Emily led us to really this idea of ideating what an anthology could look like. And so this then spun a collaboration with the Smithsonian and Running Press Kids. Then really the research and the selection, which we'll jump into, and then really what all this looks like. What does working on copy and illustration, those reviews to ensure that the work is centered in that research, and the supplemental resources and products. So we saw some of the memory games and puzzles, and we'll dive into a little bit about what's next and how do we continue to share that work through online resources like our learning labs, as well as through educator workshops. So Emily, do you want to take us through that first step on how did we get started with all of this?
Sure. So as Adrián mentioned, we have a sister unit here at the Smithsonian called Smithsonian Enterprises, which does all our business and entrepreneurship for the Smithsonian. And we were approached. We did not originally think about writing books. We were busy building a new exhibition in a new gallery space, building a learning and activity center within that gallery space that if you come visit the Smithsonian in the spring, you can see is full of books as well, because we really were inspired by that meeting, that first meeting we had. And that first meeting, this was 2018. So many years ago now, 7 years ago, we sat down in a meeting and we learned some really important information. When we started this process in 2018, only 7% of children's books were about Latino characters or subject matter. That's according to the Cooperative Children's Book Center that's housed within the School of Education at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And 7% at that time totaled about 170 books published in the United States in that year of 2018 were about Latino subjects or Latino characters. And so we saw an opportunity because the Smithsonian has a wealth of treasure. We have objects, we have stories, we have research, we have researchers and curators who spend a lot of time digging deep into these stories, into these individual objects, and being able to tell those stories. And so there was an opportunity to fill a void, to make sure that we could see more Latino content about U.S. Latino communities shared in children's books. And so we went through this process. It was, in essence, getting a master's degree in publishing at the same time that we were building a gallery, which is the image that you see in front of you in the slide deck. That's the image of the gallery space. At the same time that we were building a learning space within that same gallery. So we were learning a lot about many different things at the same time. Part of what happens when you put together an exhibition is that there is hundreds and hundreds of hours and resources that are collected for research that eventually do not make it into an exhibition script. When curators put together an exhibition, there are around 250 objects in this Presente exhibition that we hosted. And those 250 objects have object labels. Each object label that describes the object, its importance in U.S. history and who owned it or used it, is only 150 words. And so believe it or not, even though an exhibition script is over 200 pages, it's actually not the wealth of all the research that's been done. It is so synthesized down that it's very, very small in terms of information that we can contain in an exhibition. So we knew that there was this void in Latino children's books. We knew that we had plentiful resources, both in terms of objects to feature and stories to tell and research that back those stories. And so we brought those two things together, and we pitched this idea of doing an anthology of profiling people that were featured in the exhibition. The exhibition was basically what we'd like to call like a Latino 101 exhibition that started with the indigenous legacy of the Latino communities and went all the way till present day. So we were talking about people in history from the 17th century, from the 18th century, the 19th century, the 20th, and even the 21st. So we have all this wealth of resource. And so our biggest challenge was narrowing down that resource list. We started out with 105 names that we could feature. And what we realized is we're not going to be able to fit every story and every name. It's just the start of this. It's what we hope is a new era of Latino children's literature that shows kids that all of their stories matter. And an anthology that I've learned requires making decisions that are hard, but it also means revisiting the past, knowing that many people will not make it into the final book, but also realizing that the figures that are in the book don't represent the entire Latino story or the entire U.S. history. We make decisions as we write these books that are difficult. We're making them to make sure that we reach different audiences, different generations, different industries and experiences, different geographic regions are represented. So it's a lot of balancing to make sure that we have a book that tells a story that captures your imagination, but that also sparks your curiosity to go learn more. And so you'll see that the book has a listing of 30 people, but the 30 people are a combination of people who are very well known, people like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, and people who are a little less known, Pura Belpre or Marta Bernal, the first Latina clinical psychologist, Pura Belpre, the first New York Puerto Rican librarian for the New York Public Library System. So some of these folks aren't necessarily the most renowned, but they have a tremendous impact in U.S. history. And others are people that are known. And we have to make that balance and that sort of understanding that we won't be able to tell every story, but can we cover a good portion, a good swath of that reality? And also, can we ground this not only in research and in Smithsonian objects? So 25 of the 30 people that are in this book were found in the exhibition, in the Presente exhibition. But also, can we ground this in a larger purpose? What is the purpose we're trying to do? What is it that we're trying to share with our community, with our public, with the visitors online, in libraries, and obviously here in Washington, D.C. in the gallery. And what we determined is that we want to encourage parents, caregivers, educators, big brothers, big sisters to read with their families, to imagine how powerful a story can be and how you can tell that story to really ground your own understanding of your community and your place within it. And that's really what kicks off our process of Presente. There were many, many lists. We have lists upon lists upon lists trying to match the industry with the geographic area, with the type of work that somebody was known for, with their background, with Smithsonian objects. Did we have Smithsonian objects in the collection about that? Did we have Smithsonian research? And also working very closely with our publisher to make sure that we were meeting their needs as well. And so it really becomes a communal effort. We're all sitting at the table. And in this case, it was the virtual table. Because guess what? Most of this book was written during a time where we were not in person. We wrote the majority of this book during the pandemic. And so we also were learning how to work differently, right? How to work from our homes and how to review things from our home. And so I think that also gave us an opportunity to really focus in and really hone in on what would be important to tell and how could we tell it in the best possible way. And it kicked off an entirely new initiative that the museum now has made into a formal project, which is our children's, or not even just children's, our intergenerational literacy program, which really is focused on building these connections, these moments of sharing and reflection and learning together. And so the process was a very interesting experience because we were learning together with the publishers, and we hope that our readers learn together as they read and go through the books. Adrián probably has a different perspective in that he was a key instrumental part of the editing process and going through the many rounds that we went through. And so Adrián, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about your experience and how that really came to be, especially in light of the fact that we were all on our Zoom screens.
Absolutely. And actually, we'll kind of jump into talking a little bit about, that, I guess, creative process, what that editing process is. And so, you have these multiple tracks happening at the same time with a project and book of this of this type, where we were working with the author, Sabrina Burbullas. We were working, as Emily said, this is really a co-created effort where, the lists upon lists and really kind of trying to narrow it down, working together, and then really providing research, from all that we've been doing with the gallery, to basically then, have kind of like a kit or of sort that then the author could then really, interpret. Nuestra América is written, for middle grade. And so, we were working with the publisher who was working with Sabrina and, really kind of coming together. And then as the English text was being finalized, it was reviewed by our curator, and Smithsonian experts, making sure that this was, still, grounded and true to that Smithsonian scholarship, and facts that we were, looking to share with students and with our communities. And then, thinking about then how does this translate into Spanish? And so, really thinking about, how is the Spanish translation of Nuestra América, authentic, culturally relevant, really thinking about how this is, also resonates with U.S. Latino audiences. There's a lot of different, ways to, and even within Spanish, of different regions may have different ways of saying different words. And so jokingly, there is kind of like a universal, a lot of folks say that's like a news Spanish or a Telemundo Spanish, so to speak. And so, how do we take all of this and bring it to a place where Nuestra America could then be, could be understood and shared with a large variety of Spanish-speaking audiences. And, working with the translators themselves, looking at the word choices. I'll give you an example. When we were talking about farm workers, for example, there was a question of, how would we translate farm worker into Spanish? And so there was back and forth on, the translators were saying, trabajador agrícola, which translates literally to like a farm worker. But in that colloquial speak, and even in how farm workers talked about, in like literature and even organizations like the United Farm Workers Movement, for example, that Cesar Chavez was a part of, that we'll talk a little bit about in a bit. They use the word campesino, and so making that intentional choice to make sure that we're using words that are used by the community and resonate with community is something that there was a lot of intentionality in the process of making sure that even the translations had that authenticity. And in the design process here, we see different iterations of what eventually then became our front cover. Thinking about not only color, what profiles would be featured on the front cover. But even the design and the illustrations, working with Running Press and Gloria Felix, who these images are composites, and likenesses of the folks that we're describing in the text that Sabrina wrote, and so making sure that there are that they are likenesses that are as true as possible, even down to, for example, in Celia Cruz, famous Cuban American singer, there is a gap in her front teeth, and so making sure that even that is something that we could even make sure is illustrated. And so back to making sure that how do we make things that are not only meaningful but are also authentic, not only to community but also to Smithsonian research and scholarship. And this then takes us on a journey, not only through the books, but then through the puzzle and the memory game that we shared. And so taking those biographies and, trying to create snippets and trying to kind of find new ways of sharing that information across, different vessels, right? So this is not just a middle grade reader, but now it's a fun tabletop game or, a puzzle that still has those booklets with that additional information, so that even if you only have the puzzle or if you only have the memory game, you're still learning, and there's still connections to the Smithsonian and the Latino Museum's online resources, and really thinking about how do we extend that learning beyond the book, beyond the games, and so this kind of takes us then to the products, and to really even thinking about how did we get to calling Nuestra América Nuestra América. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about that and take us kind of through this process?
Yes. I think one of the things that you realize as you are going through the process of writing a book is the name of a book. It's no small feat. When somebody sits down and names a book, it's with all intentionality. It is trying to encapsulate the content, give a picture of what's inside the book, but also declare the intent of the book. And ultimately, your goal is to capture the reader's interest and imagination. And so when you think about a title and the big questions that a title lays at our feet when we open the book, think about the book and the book's title, Nuestra América, 30 Inspiring Latinas and Latinos Who Have Shaped the United States. As you walk through the title, think about the possessive of nuestra. Think about the intermixing of language, that mixed language approach of Nuestra América, 30 Inspiring Latinas and Latinos. Think about the adjectives that we use, inspiring, the categories that you come to mind as you think about inspiring Latinas and Latinos who have shaped the United States, not just who are from the United States, but who have shaped it, who have helped mold it and form it. It's a declaration of the history and the contributions that Latinos have made to forming and continuing to grow this country. There are many names you can think about when you think of this book. And it's in our intention and our hope that it helps kickstart the conversation amongst people of all ages about what they will do to help inspire and shape the nation. This is also a call to action, right? It's how can you help inspire and shape the nation? I find myself curious and hopeful when I think about the name of this book. I hope that it will push the conversation forward of what it means to be an individual that helps shape a community. We all help shape our local communities and eventually the larger society. And so I find myself thinking about that inspiration, about the wonder that goes with that, and how can we capture that moment that makes us ponder, that makes us think, and that makes us be in awe of individuals, right? I think inspiring hope is one of the things that this book helps do, right? It helps inspire us to think that we too can be one of those 30 inspiring individuals. And believe me, it was very challenging to narrow it down to 30. I wanted so many other names in this book. There's just a reality of how many pages you can print. And I think one of the things that really stuck with me is this idea that every word, every image, every statement that you make in a book is intentional because it's finite. It's not infinite, right? And in a world of the internet, in the world of multiple web pages, you have an infinite number of ways in which you can tell a story and communicate and share pictures. In the world of print, there is a finite number of pages, a finite number of illustrations, a finite number of words and statements you can include. And so everything was done with an intentionality that brings upon it its own sort of moment of reflection. How can I best say this? Who can best display that, right? And so I think when we think about some of the people we picked, it's also who can best display some of these things that are very important to our lived experiences as Americans, right? And how we want to be remembered and how we want our community to be highlighted. And I think that was something that was really key for us in naming the book, is how can we leave that impression, that declaration, that inspiration, and that positivity of contribution, of sharing, of inspiring, and of continuing, right? That there is a continued future and continued future opportunities for young people who pick up this book in a local library or in a classroom. And so I think we also were thinking about who can use this book in home libraries, in school libraries. And so thinking about that also helped us think about what's next after we write these books. What's next? And so, Adrián, do you want to share what's next?
Absolutely. So, really think, I think that that's really kind of that, not only in the present where we're thinking about, well, creating this one book, or it's not an ephemeral process. This is something that remains. And thinking about, how do we share this? What is that? What's next? You have these books, and so in front of us we have a snapshot of what is our Smithsonian Learning Lab, and that is the Smithsonian's online portal to really education at large. And so within it we create these modules, which they call collections, where we've created these resources in English and in Spanish around Nuestra América. And so in the back of Nuestra América, there is an extension activity. We have a whole reading guide, really thinking about how we as educators at the museum, how can we share, what are those questions? How do we extend that thinking, to continue those conversations at home with our families, at school, in the classroom, and what is something tangible, thinking about who inspires us in our families or in our communities. That's actually one of the big questions in the reading guide, when you're kind of drawing your own portrait of someone that's important and meaningful to you. And so, also sharing that, these are, folks that have shaped the US, but there are folks that have shaped our lives and our communities and our families. And so really kind of centering that as well. And so that's, that extended learning within the book, online through Learning Lab. And we've also been traveling the country doing teacher professional development workshops around the series of books that includes Nuestra América, another one that's Nuestras Voces as well, and to really kind of think about how we understand the American experience through children's literature. And so, how educators can use techniques that we use in the museum, object-based learning, active learning, inquiry-based learning, to kind of to help augment, the things that they're already teaching and doing in the classroom. And these are stories of that span, generations, at different points in history. And so, how can we also, share that these resources exist and tools to help them be incorporated. And so, in addition to these online things, we've also done things even like, and let me get to this next slide here, working on Apple on Apple Maps and Guides. So even thinking about the stories that are found in Nuestra América and where are they geographically across the country. And so here there are 11 stories, 11 Latinas that are featured in the book, and really thinking about, where do they exist? So for example, here we have Dolores Huerta and Dolores Huerta Gateway Park. And so are these stories in our communities, and how do we kind of create more intentional connections through this work as well. So I'm gonna take a moment here, and we'll transition a little bit to kind of center the book with the Smithsonian collection and those connections. And so, as Emily mentioned, many of the stories in the book were found in the Presente exhibition, are in our Smithsonian's collection. And so we'll take the next couple of minutes to walk through a couple of profiles of folks and show those connections, not only from the book, but also to the Smithsonian collection. And so right here we have Cesar Chavez, who's a community and labor organizer, co-founder of the United Farm Workers Movement, also awarded a Medal of Freedom, posthumously as well. And so thinking about, this story, as we're thinking about what are the objects in the Smithsonian collection that connect to these. And so here are just a few examples here. Here we have one of a jacket that he wore, and that is in the collection of our Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and a portrait here. It's an oil on canvas that is in our Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery. And so, really even thinking about, how these stories are tangible and can be found in the treasures of our nation's museum. Emily, do you want to tell us a little bit about Oscar de la Renta?
So Oscar de la Renta, featured here, fashion designer, originally Dominican born, came to New York to really try his hand at being a fashion designer, eventually working for some of the major fashion houses and establishing his own major fashion house. And when you see the collection that the Smithsonian has, there's a collection at the National Museum of American History on Hispanic designers, and he is one of the first and foremost Hispanic designers. He designed this gold dress that you see here. It's called the Minerva dress in 2002, and then donated it to the museum. But even more importantly, Oscar de la Renta inspires young Latino designers today with his quintessential style, and with the fact that he was such an important fashion figure that First Lady Laura Bush and other First Ladies would wear his designs and ask him to design for them. So really cementing him as a Dominican American fashion designer and artist. And there's a artist painting here that you see that's in the National Portrait Gallery of him posing. And I think that really is emblematic of his style, of his own very sharp way of seeing fashion and identity combine.
Thanks so much, Emily. We'll talk briefly also about Lin-Manuel Miranda, actor, playwright, and composer. He's most well known for the Broadway musical Hamilton, which won a Pulitzer Prize. And he also wrote a bunch of others, including In the Heights. Really thinking about, just how he transformed an American story, of the founding of our country, to Broadway. And so in the Smithsonian's collection, we have a couple of pieces here. Here is the costume that he actually wore on Broadway in Hamilton. That's in the American History collection. And then this photograph that, is just in kind of one of those iconic poses. And so, really even just thinking about how, Lin-Manuel Miranda and his work are now so closely associated with, this, story of Alexander Hamilton and the founding of our country, and how so many folks now know the story because of, the Broadway musical and all of that. And so just really kind of bringing those connections together and, really showing that, there is objects and photographs that really kind of connect these stories to what we have here at the Smithsonian. Emily, I know that our next figure is one of your favorites.
Yes. So I am what they call a frustrated astronaut. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid and went to space camp, did the whole thing, figured out I don't love physics and I really don't like roller coasters. So instead, I became a teacher of all of this wonderful science content. And Ellen Ochoa, an engineer, an astronaut, a government public servant leader, and an inventor. She has 2 patents to her name. She was a 4-time astronaut. The first Latina astronaut flew on Space Shuttle Discovery, which is also in the Smithsonian's collection. And then eventually led the Johnson Space Center and the Manned Space Center in Houston, Texas. Ellen Ochoa has a few things at the Smithsonian. Her name badge is one of those. And we had on loan for the Presente exhibition her T-38 helmet, T-38 being one of the fighter planes that they, and jet aircraft that they fly, that astronauts fly. And we've been so lucky to be able to collect from Dr. Ochoa. She is somebody that is, still inspiring young girls today to become scientists and inventors and engineers. So much so that Barbie just released her very own amazing Barbie doll this Hispanic Heritage Month.
And last but not least, and this actually ties to some of our exciting projects that are coming down the line, is Celia Cruz, who is probably needs little introduction. She is a singer who is also known as the Queen of Salsa and salsa music. She's a 2-time Grammy Award winner and a 3-time Latin Grammy Award winner. And the Smithsonian and the National Museum of the American Latino as well. We are so privileged to have pieces of Celia Cruz's story in the National Collection. To the left, we have a dress that Celia Cruz wore in probably one of her many performances, designed by Jose Enrique Arteaga, and this is actually in the collection of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. And to the right of that dress, as a very special pair of shoes, and Celia Cruz is known for her style, hair, but also her shoes. And actually, these are shoes that were specifically designed for Celia Cruz. This is a custom design by Willys of Hollywood. And what's actually really special about these is that you'll note it's a cantilever heel. So it's not a traditional stiletto or high heel. And these, she had them designed in this way so that she could feel like she was lifting off the stage when she danced and she was performing. And so, back to that really larger than life story of Celia herself. And Emily, do you want to take us through in the next minute or so we have before we jump into questions about what's next, and Celia's story being a part of some exciting things we have coming down the pike?
Enough. We are lucky enough to be opening a new exhibition, and these books still continue to inspire connections to our new exhibition, Puro Ritmo, the musical journey of salsa. Adrián is going to showcase a little bit of the imagery behind this exhibition. This is a sneak peek. It opens spring of 2026, and it's going to introduce some of the remarkable musicians who laid foundations for genres like mambo, Latin jazz, and salsa. You'll be able to get to know their stories as you explore the family of Cuban-born rhythms that changed how Americans dance and play music, from jazz and rock and roll to electronic music. And so Puro Ritmo, the musical journey of salsa, will feature musicians like Eddie Palmieri, Willie Colon, and of course, the one and only queen of salsa, Celia Cruz, who you can see in the Nuestra América anthology. And so you'll continue to see more inspiration from the book that we've been talking about today continue to come alive in the next year or so with additional activities, resources, and obviously some amazing objects, music, and an exhibition. And so really to close this conversation and really open the floor up to questions or conversation and comments, is that this book is more than an anthology of Latino leaders. It's a conversation with the reader about our dreams and our achievements. For those that want to continue on this journey, I want to leave you with a couple of questions to think about and consider as you read this book yourself or with your family or your students or friends or community neighbors in your area. What does it mean to be inspirational? How do we harness the power of the written word to inspire the dreamers and the leaders of tomorrow? And how can we help the next generation shape the future of our country, of our America? And what does that look like? What does the next Nuestra América, our America book, look like? Thank you so much for having us. And with that, we open it up to questions.
Thank you so much. And just sharing here our social handles and our website so you can continue following us and learning more about the museum, our work, and what's next.
Thank you both so much. We learned so much amazing history about some of our icons. So I thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I want to dive in first with some questions from Bethany. We had a lot of people asking about the illustrations and the artwork in the book. And Bethany is saying, Gloria Felix's illustrations bring the book to life. How can art and storytelling connect with science education to make history and innovation more accessible? And I think for some context, Bethany is saying that they are from Coalinga College Firebaugh Center, where the students participate in the Puente program and a variety of STEM pathways. So they're interested particularly in STEM.
So wonderful question, Bethany. We have a whole slew of resources. If you go onto our website, you can look up bilingual resources, and there's a whole slew of resources. But there's one in particular that's very interesting for this question about illustration, which is we have an activity on the principles and elements of design. And so it really talks a little bit about the science behind the art, things that can influence the art making process. So the canvas, the paint, the technique that you can use with a particular brush. And so we really talk about the science behind the art form and how you can put the art form together. The other thing that we do that is really interesting with an individual inspired by somebody who was in the Presente exhibition, Clotilde Arias. Adrián, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that one.
Absolutely. And so actually this is one of my favorite activities where we were exploring really the materials and the science behind the dyes in the Star Spangled Banner. And so Clotilde Arias is a Peruvian American who wrote the only singable and approved translation of the Star Spangled Banner in Spanish. She was so proud to be an American that, she had a career in, developing jingles and all sorts of kind of like marketing, and really took this to heart to taking on this project. And so looking at the dyes behind not only the music behind the Star Spangled Banner, but also the dyes that are used in the Star Spangled Banner that we have in the collection is actually made from a beetle known as cochinilla or cochineal. And so these are beetles that are native to Mexico, that are finely crushed and used to give the really deep reds, like in the original Star Spangled Banner, in paintings that are very famous by great masters across Europe, as well as in Mexican art and folklore. And so even just kind of thinking about those connections, very scientific but also very cultural. And so we have that activity that not only shares a history, but also an application of how you can actually use natural dyes to make art. So you make your own natural dyes using things like red cabbage, beets, etc., and then making your own salt paints, which is also super fun. So lots of really fun ways to think about history, but also how art and culture and science, and how really they're also intermingled, and we live in a very interdisciplinary world. You can't do one without the other.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing resources. The other question I want to ask by Bethany is, you mentioned the intergenerational literacy program that you've created. And Bethany is saying the book is designed for both children and adults. How can students use it as a way to connect with parents, grandparents, or younger siblings about Latino history and innovations?
Wonderful question. Using the reading guide that's found in the book, there are some discussion questions that you can kick off a conversation with your family about. Things like even the question that I just posed to the public of what makes someone inspirational? What do you think about when you think about inspiring the next generation? A lot of times it's just about starting with a question, and really using that question to start a conversation. So you can think about the discussion questions that are found in the reading guide as a way to just kick off a conversation at the family dinner table. Another idea that we have is to do paired reading, where you read an entry, say about Pura Belpre, for instance, who maybe you don't know a lot about, and maybe your caregiver, your family, your grandparent also doesn't know a lot about, and you learn together as you go. And then you can reflect on, she happened to be a librarian. You can reflect on, your experiences going to the library as a kid, or, maybe it's with your parents, and do you go to the library with your parents? So that's another possibility and another way to potentially connect intergenerationally.
Great, thank you. Robert is asking, who did you find the most surprising person that you discovered in your research, and why? So I imagine that might be different for each of you.
Adrián, do you want to start first, or would you like me to take that first stab?
Yeah, why don't you kick us off, Emily?
So the person that I found most interesting, it's not surprising. I was really just very much taken by understanding a little bit more about Pura Belpre. I had seen the Pura Belpre Award in children's books. So when you go to like a library, there's like the Newbery medal winners, and then there's like the Bulpre medal winners. I'd seen the children's book with the little tag, but I had never really understood what that meant until I started doing research about her. And it was amazing because she was a woman who really thought outside the box. She knew that people weren't going to her community. She didn't see her community going to the library system that she worked at. They didn't go to the New York Public Library. So she figured out a way to take the books to them. She created like a biblio wagon, right, where she would take the New York Public Library books to them, and then she would put together puppet shows that talked about the book's stories, the stories that were found in the books. The puppets would be the people interpreting the stories found in those books, and get people to want to go to the library. I thought that was a fascinating story that we don't ever really hear about, because you think about the medals and the awards recognitions that children's authors and illustrators get, and you never really think about the person who that medal is named after, right? And so I had seen it. I'd never made the connection with this person. And then to really make the connection and then to go the step further, we actually had the puppets in the exhibition. Like the little puppets that she used, we had them in the exhibition. And that just connection to the object made the story come to life in a way that I didn't realize I feel so connected to. Now that I don't see them in the exhibition because the exhibition is closed, I miss seeing them every day because they were just a really fun part of my experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. What about you, Adrián?
That was really funny because I was going to say Presente as well. No. It's just that it was, for the reasons Emily mentioned, she was just so fascinating and really, a vanguard for, the turn of the last century. And the puppets not only narrated the stories, we actually were able to find a troupe that does reenactments of Pura and her storytelling, and so we were able to bring that to the opening of the exhibit festival when we opened Presente. And so really thinking about how this all comes to life. And so there was a little it's a little cockroach and a little mouse or rat. So it's like la cucarachita Martina y el ratoncito Pérez. And so even kind of taking that to stories of folkloric stories of where she came from, and then stories that resonated with the kids that she was connecting with. And so really kind of back to those ideas of really you can't be what you can't see, and that even 100+ years ago there was somebody even thinking about these conversations about how do I make my patrons feel welcomed and feel seen in spaces like libraries. And so, I'm Team Pura 100%.
That's amazing. So Mephi from Detroit Public Library is wondering if any of the 30 people featured in the book are persons with physical disabilities, and can you talk about them and their contribution? And even if none of the 30 are, maybe perhaps in the wider list before you narrowed it down to 30.
So we had 105 names to begin with, and then we were told cut it down to 30. We do have in the exhibition, in the Presente exhibition, we were very focused on accessibility and making sure that people felt seen. And so there are people that are neurodivergent, people who have physical disabilities, and so one of the things that we try to make sure of is to not make a distinction, right? That a disability isn't something that is, a thing that will hamper you. We wanted to show people that, everybody can contribute. Everybody has a story to tell, and everybody's story is important. And so you can actually find those in our, the Presente exhibition. While it is closed, the exhibition has an online component, an online version, so to speak. And you can see some of those folks featured in our online component off of our website if you go to latino.si.edu. And there's actually a whole micro exhibition on that. So, that's something that we really take to heart. We are making sure that a lot of the work that we do not only shows people. We had a family festival 3 days ago, I guess, on Saturday. And we do these things called community art walls. And we are preparing for the next exhibition, which is all about music. And we wanted to feature a community artist here from DC. And we featured a community artist from DC. He's a former student of Gallaudet University and the Maryland Institute of College and Art and Design. And he featured the sounds of Latino DC, but it's not how he hears it, it's how he sees it. He is deaf, but the piece is how he sees visually the music of the DC Latino neighborhoods. And so that's just one example of how we try to make sure that those communities are represented as well.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. So I think the last question we're going to ask is Dr. Phyllis. Several people have asked the same question. Dr. Phyllis is wondering about resources to host a mini exhibit and book display highlighting the museum's works, the history of the Latino and Hispanic peoples, and their books in general. Are there those kinds of resources available on your website too?
Adrián, I'm going to let you take this question because you have a great answer of what's upcoming, but also you were just in Detroit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was actually just in Michigan like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, working with the United Way of Southeastern Michigan. We did some educator workshops in Southwest, in addition to kind of having conversations with community. And so really this is just the start of, finding ways for us to co-create, co-host, and be in communities in meaningful and intentional ways. To date, we have visited over 50 cities and rural communities across 25 states, listening and learning about how we as a museum can serve communities in ways that resonate, recognizing that what works in Detroit will not work in, Albuquerque, for example. And so we're definitely looking at finding ways to bring the museum's resources. There's either as many exhibits, other tours. We have 2 touring exhibits that are going around the country right now, but definitely we are iterating and thinking about, what are smaller bite-sized things that can go to classrooms or virtual experiences that you can beam in to be with us. So all of that is in the works. So that's a really, really great question.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for your time and the work that you're doing. It's incredible, and I can't thank you enough for being here to talk with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, if you'd like more information, visit our website. I think, we are a small but mighty team, and so we're trying to reach all communities across the country. Our online resources are always available. So please reach out via those resources.
And I did take the email address that you just dropped in our chat, Emily, and I'm going to put that in the resources area so people can reach out with questions if they have it.
Absolutely.
I also want to extend a huge thank you
so much.
A huge thank you to all of our audience members for joining us for the presentation today. Without your support, none of this would be possible. So we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Below the live stream video in that resources area I was talking about, you can find a link to the book, the website, and some contact information. We look forward to everyone joining us on October 9th with fantasy fiction mega author Leigh Bardugo, and then again on October 22nd when we will chat with Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai. Be sure to register for these and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I am Brandon Adler, and thank you for joining us.